Again, good morning and greetings. So good for me to be here at East Hills, and just thankful for this privilege and honor. I now want to thank you, the East Hills Moravian congregation, for your continued and faithful support of the work of the Border World Mission. We could not do what we do without you. A portion of the funds that go from here to support the work of the Northern Province, a portion of that comes to us, along with what we receive also from the Southern Province here in North America. And those two chunks of money form the largest portion of our operating budget and allow us to do so very much more, so that when we are working with disasters across the globe in our Moravian parts of the world, we can put 100% of those donations immediately to the cause at hand rather than to cover overhead, because that's already taken care of by the way we are supported on an annual basis by both the Northern and Southern provinces. So we thank you for that support, not only to the annual giving, but also in the many ways you respond when we need, again, responses for disasters. So I thank you very much for all of that, and bring you greetings from Brother Justin Robach, our Executive Director, as well as the rest of the staff and the board that helps to guide our ministry together. So thank you for that. Again, your gifts help us to step in when the storms of life affect so many of our brothers and sisters around the world. Most notably, two storms that happened in 2019, Hurricane Iota and Eta, that hit the Nicaraguan and Honduras coasts and caused extensive flooding inland. We were able to raise, again, from around the Moravian Church, over $250,000 very quickly, and that money was sent immediately to provide aid to those folks. Storms happen, don't they? Storms happen quite frequently. Most recently, I took about a 15-hour trip that took me, I left my house at 4:30 in the morning to get to ABE, to get the 6 o'clock flight, Delta flight to Atlanta. And then got on the flight from Atlanta that was to take me to Miami for meetings that afternoon. Boarded that flight about 8 o'clock, and we taxied away from the gate and then sat on the runway. The pilot said Miami was having storms, so they had temporarily shut down, but no worries. They looked like there was a window that would be coming forward soon. So we sat on the tarmac in Atlanta for about an hour, and finally the captain came on and said, "We've gotten the clearance, so here we go." And we took off, and it was in one of those airplanes that has the screens on the seat in front of you, and you can track your flight. And as we left Atlanta, could see the target was Miami. But I noticed about 45 minutes into the flight, the plane kept going further out into the Atlantic Ocean, and Miami was to the west, but we kept flying further east. And soon the captain came on and he said, "Well, they have closed the airport again in Miami, and we're going to just circle." So we circled the Bahamas and all sorts of other nice-looking islands that we could see, and waiting. And we circled and circled some more, and finally, the captain came on and said, "Well, there was one slot open, and another airplane took it, and we're running out of fuel, so we're going to go to Orlando." So I got to Orlando about 2 o'clock in the afternoon now, and we sat there for a while after they refueled, and then they finally said, "Well, they've shut down again, so we're going to get you off the plane." Got us off the plane, and at one point rushed us all back on because there was another window, but then succeeding thunderstorms went through the Orlando area, shutting down the Orlando airport. So they got us all off again and said, maybe at 7 o'clock we'll have a different crew, because by then our flight crew had timed out. So actually I was able to get a flight back to Atlanta, and I landed in Allentown at 11:30 at night after leaving here at 4:30 in the morning, all to come right back home. because I had missed most of my meetings that were to have been that afternoon. So how about that for the storms of life and the distractions that they can cause us? And I'll confess to some internal strife as well. How are these things going to get taken care of that we were supposed to meet? Well, thankfully, Justin Robach, our executive director, was meeting me, and he was on that one plane that did make it in, so he was able to meet with folks and take care of things. However, for him, it took him 4 days to get back out because of that storm system. And perhaps you read about it in the paper. The South Florida area has just been receiving an amazing amount of rain. So storms happen, and they change our lives in many ways. And again, our scripture lessons all in one way or another touch on some of that. Not so much the storm itself, but what it does to us and the storms that rage within our own souls. In our gospel lesson for this morning from Mark, it records one of the 6 voyages that Jesus took with his disciples out onto the Sea of Galilee, which really isn't a sea. It's a really large lake, freshwater lake, and a remarkable place to be. And that's the great majority of Jesus' ministry was around the Sea of Galilee, and more than a few of his disciples were fishermen that fished on the Sea of Galilee on a daily basis for their living. The first few chapters of Mark's gospel are really a whirlwind of activity and busyness for Jesus and his new disciples. And it seems that in the midst of all of that busyness, Jesus wanted to get away from the crowds for just a little bit. And one of the best ways of doing that was to get on a boat and actually push away from the shore and go to the other side, perhaps where they weren't quite as well known. So that is exactly what they did. And as they journey across the lake, Jesus falls asleep in the boat, perhaps indicating some of his own exhaustion and needing of rest. And as he sleeps, a severe storm whips up on the sea, which is not too terribly unusual. But this one's severe enough that even the professional fishermen on his own discipleship crew, they begin to fear for their own lives as they're out in the middle of this really large lake. The winds and the waves are buffeting. They don't know what to do, and Jesus is still sound asleep in the boat. So they wake him up, asking, "Do you not care for us? Do you not care for us that you would leave us to die here in this storm?" Their reaction certainly does indicate that they did not quite understand who this Jesus was. And not only the power that he contained, but also in his care for them, his love for them, that they would even doubt that. And perhaps that is certainly a natural reaction that we exhibit when the storms of life visit us. Job's life had been one gigantic hurricane for some time now. The once happy and wealthy man has now lost everything. His farm, his livestock, his money, now even his family are all dead. All that gave him joy, all that gave him purpose, all that gave him meaning, all that made him happy in life was completely gone. And he has nothing. Quite the storm. His 3 well-meaning friends have dispensed meaningless advice for chapters and chapters and chapters in Job. So now Job takes his complaint directly to God. At one point he says, and I quote, "If I go forward, God is not there, or backward, I cannot perceive him. On the left, he hides. I cannot behold God. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him." Job cannot see God's presence in the midst of his suffering, and he's not alone. Those disciples were also asking that same question. We're begging, and he's sleeping. He's not aware. He doesn't care. He's not for us right now. And that's exactly where Job was in the midst of his storm. Our text from Job today gave God's profound answer. I won't read it all, but it begins, "Where were you," God says, "when I created the world?" Where were you when I created everything that is? In other words, God is saying God is who God is. God's wisdom and love has been woven into the mystery of creation itself. And we as humans can never completely understand the whole picture. We certainly understand our part of it and the suffering certainly that we are a part of. But God sees something far bigger, both in terms of scope as well as in time. So when we feel alone, we're not, is what God is telling Job. I've been here all along, and I will continue to be so. Our text from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians lists in great details many of the storms which besailed Paul and his traveling companions. Hardships, afflictions, calamities, times of being in prison, riots, labor, heavy labor, sleepless nights, and hunger. Paul has experienced all of this because of his missionary work. But Paul says this is how we met it: through purity, knowledge, patience, kindness, holiness in spirit, genuine love, truthful speech, and in the power of God. For Paul, this is how we are to meet the storms in life, knowing that Jesus is with us in the midst of them. And I love the way Paul ends that reading that we had this morning. He says, "Open wide your hearts." Open wide your hearts to see the possibilities even within which you now suffer. Open wide your hearts. We can all wonder, for instance, where God was during the height of the pandemic as we were stuck in our homes and couldn't take our trips to Herrnhut. We were all stuck in our homes. Hospitals were overrun with severe cases, and we had little to fight off the disease. We've been through quite a storm, and its ripple effects still continue today. While I do not believe that God caused the pandemic to teach us some lessons, I do believe that God was very much involved in helping us to work through it and the creative work that went on. There's been a lot learned scientifically, and even congregations were challenged to seek better ways to stay in touch with parishioners. And I can only applaud the hard work that you all have done here. These cameras wouldn't be in this sanctuary if it weren't for COVID. And while it was no fun going through it, the lasting benefits of the things that were learned and the attempts that are now being made to keep more and more people in touch with us in many, many different ways, I think is a miraculous outcome. Congregations around the world are streaming their worship services, and now at any time in the week that I find the time, I can tune into a worship service in Herrnhut or in Mbeya, Tanzania, or in Managua, Nicaragua. It does not matter. They're all doing it as well. So the valuable thing for us to do is to ask in our recent storms, what lessons have we learned about who was left behind? What lessons have we learned about who was most vulnerable? What lessons have we learned about caring for our neighbors? How has our mission, both individually and as a congregation, changed through these recent storms? Because these congregations, like you here at East Hills, are a Sea of Galilee. You're a place of healing and a place of wholeness, a place where we all can gather from life and its difficulties to know and hear the love of God. I loved it. I got here at about 8:30, and it was really quiet in here. And then as more and more people came, it got louder and louder as people are checking in and telling stories and enjoying fellowship with one another. And it took Karen to come up here and to say, "Welcome." And the noise died down, and together our hearts were joined in an hour of worship. This is valuable stuff. And as I read the announcements that were scrolling through this morning, the many ways in which you all reach out and do ministry, here in not only in Bethlehem, but again through the cooperation and partnership that we enjoy with you at the Border World Mission to again extend God's hands of healing and mercy and hope and love and grace beyond our physical and national boundaries. It's amazing. And that's what we're called to do. So again, each of us gather in places where we can find God's love in the midst of the storms of our own lives, but then join together to extend God's love to those experiences, the storms that are out there, because the storms have come and the storms will come. But thanks be to God, we will never, ever, ever be alone, because we've got each other, we've got the love of God that is everlasting. Thanks be to God. Amen.